When you're editing source code, it's easy to get lost in a sea of unfamiliar syntax, run-on lines, and confusing conventions. Fortunately, a code editor that's aware of the programming language you're using can be extremely helpful. Now, I'm going to show you TextMate. It is the text editor that I prefer to use on a Macintosh, and you can find similar free alternatives as well as ones for Windows. So first, I'm going to take a look at the PHP context for TextMate. So you can go down here to the bottom of the screen, and you'll notice that there's a pop-up menu here with many different programming languages, and the one that we're going to pick is not PHP, but actually HTML. What's good about TextMate is that it will highlight both the HTML and the PHP as you type it. So if I start off with an HTML document like this, I can just go into PHP. So I hit PHP and hit tab, and it just pops open the open and close tag for PHP. So first I'm going to type in some functions and some classes here just to show how the syntax highlighting works. So I'm typing in function, and as soon as I type in the word function out completely, it changes that from red to blue. And then I can type in the function name. I will type in function1, and you'll notice that that keeps it red because that's the name of the function. However, when I begin to type in the parentheses that make up the function signature there, it changes that to a dark blue. We can use some other keywords here like class, and again, it will have it in red until I type it out in full. And notice that the name of the class is underlined when I type it out. In addition to syntax highlighting, TextMate has features where you have tab completion. So if I just type in the letters FUN and then hit tab, it automatically knows that I want to write a function. If I'm doing this within the context of an object, I would want to specify whether it's a public function or a private one, but I can just backspace this and hit tab again, and then it brings me right to where I want to type in the function name. If I type tab once more, it'll bring me to the argument list, and if I hit tab one more time, it brings me into the body of the function. And there's tab completion for the for each loop, and again, it just has tab stops at every variable that I need to change. Let's also take a look at how TextMate will interpret an existing PHP file. This is a PHP file that is included with Joomla, and it is very large. It is code that is used to connect to the database, and you'll notice that we start off with a class with different properties, and the class also has several different functions inside. And this can be very, very confusing to navigate if you don't know your way around this file. So you'll notice that TextMate has parsed out not only the name of the database class, but also the name of all the functions. So if there's a function that you know that is in this class and you want to navigate to it, just pick it from the list, and TextMate will automatically take you there. While I'm using TextMate, some people will prefer an integrated development environment. An example of one is Eclipse. An integrated development environment will have a debugger and other tools that will make it easier for you to write PHP code. I personally find integrated development environments to be a little bit heavy and sometimes cluttered, but they still provide the syntax highlighting that I like, as well as additional tools that can make it easier for you to write PHP code. So it's a good idea to pick up a good text editor like TextMate or an integrated development environment and try both and see which one you're more comfortable with. For the rest of this course, I'll be using TextMate. A code-aware text editor or IDE is one of the most important things to have in your programming toolkit. Syntax highlighting can help you avoid making mistakes, while keyboard shortcuts can call up code in an instant. Before you start developing PHP code, it's a good idea to check your PHP configuration first. There are a few settings that can help you find and fix bugs more quickly. Since I'm using MAMP, I'm going to open up the MAMP folder and then go to the htdocs folder. This is the root web folder. Next, I'm going to copy in phpinfo.php. I'm going to use this file to help me find the PHP configuration file. And you'll notice in this file, it's just an open PHP tag and the command phpinfo. Now I'm going to go to phpinfo in my browser. So you'll notice on this line, there's a section for loaded configuration file. It's pointing to applications mamp conf php53 php.ini. This is the PHP configuration file that's been loaded, so this is the one that I need to change. I'm going to go back to the htdocs folder and remove the phpinfo.php file. Now let's go to the php.ini file. Go to the conf folder and go to php53. Now I'm going to open php.ini. Now look for a setting called error reporting. Whenever you're running PHP as a development environment, you want to make sure that error reporting is set to E_all. If you don't have error reporting set to E_all, you won't get all of the errors that PHP is generating. PHP will generate a level of error called a notice, and that will occur whenever you do something like output a variable that hasn't been set yet. While this isn't a hard and fast error, it is a bad programming practice. So setting error reporting to E_all will make noise whenever that happens. Next, you're going to want to set display errors to on. Now, to demonstrate why we want to have display errors on, I'm going to load up a file that has an error in it and show what happens when you have display errors off. Go to the exercise files and copy broken.php, and we're going to go back to that htdocs folder and just paste broken.php into that folder. So you'll notice here I have function 1, function 2, and function 3. I'm calling function 1, which calls function 2, which calls function 3, which calls function 4, which doesn't exist. So that's going to cause an error. However, if I go to that PHP script right now, you'll notice that nothing displays. It just displays a blank page, and we have no way of knowing what's going on. So let's change the PHP configuration so that it gives us an error message on screen. Set display errors to on, and then save the PHP ini file, and then restart MAMP. After MAMP has been restarted, refresh the page. You'll notice now it's giving us fatal error, call to undefined function, function 4. This is much more helpful when you're writing your PHP code than when you're running it in production. In addition to displaying errors, there's another level that we can take it if you have an extension installed called xdebug. Go back to PHP ini and scroll down to the bottom. While the xdebug extension is pre-installed with MAMP, you may have to install it on your PHP installation. I'm going to uncomment this line, and this will enable xdebug in MAMP. Now save php.ini and restart MAMP. Now let's go back to the browser and hit refresh. So now you'll notice we get a little bit more of a detailed error report. It's showing not only which line it had the error, but it's giving us a full stack trace of what happened. So it's showing that we started off in the main file, then we called function 1, then we called function 2, and then we called function 3, and that's where we hit the error. You can mix and match your PHP ini configuration for the settings that work for you. I'm going to revert everything back to the MAMP standard php.ini file. While there are tools that can help your PHP development, debuggers and inspectors on the browser side are now also a part of any web developer's toolkit. Let's take a look at the Firebug extension for Firefox, as well as the inspector in Safari. Firebug is a free download from getfirebug.com, and it installs this toolbar button on the right-hand side of the screen. Now you'll notice we have a console here that's already telling us a few errors that we have with this site. We've removed the print.css file, but Joomla is still referring to it. So any missing assets like this are going to show in the console. They're also going to show in this net tab. So for instance, if we click on all, this will show all of the HTTP requests that Firefox is trying to make. It will highlight any missing assets in red and also show the HTTP response code. Another thing that you can do with Firebug is inspect your HTML source. So for instance, if we want to see the HTML markup that's generating this header, we can right-click on it and choose Inspect Element, and that'll bring us right to the header. We can also adjust the CSS that is styling this header. So for instance, if we want to remove this padding, we can just remove this line. We can also add lines. So for instance, if I wanted to make the font bigger, I could say font size and set that to 3 EMs. I can also remove that by just clicking this. You can also use the console to run JavaScript on the fly. Click on this button on the right-hand side and just type in some JavaScript. Then click Run, And you can see that we can generate an alert just by typing it in and clicking the Run button. This will have access to all the JavaScript variables that have been initialized, so you can use this to debug things without necessarily refreshing the page. Also notice on the Net tab that there is an XHR section. What this will do is whenever you're making an asynchronous JavaScript request, it'll appear down here on a line. And then when the response comes back from the server, you'll be able to see exactly what output the server sent. So for instance, if this JavaScript file was retrieved during an asynchronous request, we'd be able to browse the response that came back from the server on this tab. Now, Firefox is not the only browser that has an inspector like this. All of the major browsers now have an inspector you can use to debug the front end of your site. Let's take a look at the inspector in Safari. Go to the Safari menu and open up Preferences, then click on the Advanced tab and check off Show Develop menu in Menu Bar. Then choose Show Web Inspector from the Develop menu. You'll notice that it's very similar to Firebug. You can inspect elements, and there's a console that shows when you have missing assets. And just like Firebug, it lists all the assets that have been loaded by the web browser. The Chrome web browser also has a similar web inspector because Chrome and Safari share parts of a codebase. The browser side of web development has improved dramatically. With the increase in web applications using asynchronous HTTP requests, using a web inspection tool is now essential. Web inspectors also ease JavaScript debugging and notify you of missing assets.